Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a great intro. You said every word just the way I wrote it. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Welcome. Happy to have you all here. As just even the walk from the car to the door was just bone chilling. So happy that you decided to make the trip out here today. Appreciate that very much. Most people like to begin with me answering this basic question of why. Why am I interested in Vernors? Why did I write a book? Why do I have this collection? Why do I have a collector's group? And I wish I had a really good answer for you, but no one I know worked for Vernors, so I don't have that connection. I'm not related to the Vernors. I wish I was, but I am not, unfortunately, related to the Vernors. My mom was a collector of pressed glass pattern called Moon and Star, and we used to go around to flea markets and antique stores, and I would go in tow with her, and I just kind of got the collector's bug. And when I first started actually having, some money of my own, I started a collection of things that were related to Detroit. And turns out that's a pretty big topic. And then I was rummaging around in my parents' garage, and I found this box of bottles. And they were all Vernors bottles, and they were all deposit bottles, but the law had changed. And so you couldn't return them anymore, but my parents were, Depression babies, and so they kept them anyway, just in case, they might need them. And so I said, could I have that box of Vernors bottles you got in the garage? And they were delighted to get rid of them. And then all of a sudden, I had more Vernors things than anything else. And so I decided at that point to just concentrate on collecting Vernors. And that was, pretty close to 45 years ago, which is when I'm only 42, so that's a long time to be collecting. But so I decided to look at that, and I didn't at the time know that Vernors is the oldest continuously produced soda pop in America. It's older than Coke, older than Pepsi, older than Hires. Anybody of you from out east, it's older than Moxie. And I didn't know that at the time. And so a lot of the things that I found out along my collecting trip have made me really happy that it was Vernors that I really got interested in the most at the very beginning. So what I want to do today is I want to tell you the story of Vernors. And here you can see, whoops, I'm sorry, went backwards. Here you can see the Vernors sign, and both of these buildings are actually the Vernors factory. I'll get out of your people's way here. Vernors factory about 1940. And at the time, Vernors was considered the most modern bottling facility in the world. And it's huge. Just look at that. It's just absolutely huge. Now, I don't know exactly what was going on the Detroit River that day. I have never seen the river look quite that rough. And I don't know what boat that is right there. Maybe that, it's not there. That looks like a boblo over there, but that might be the Tajmu or the Detroiter or something like that on the river. The river was, very different back in those days. So how did Vernors turn into the most modern bottling facility in the world? The story starts back when a young James Vernor was a teenager, and he went to work for Higbee and Stearns druggists in Detroit. And he was he did packages. He would deliver those packages around the city. He would, mix up various potions for the pharmacist who was there at the drugstore. And all good drugstores had a soda fountain. So he would spend some time behind the soda fountain as well. He was messing around with a formula for ginger ale, and he could never get it right. it was always just way too strong, totally undrinkable. And then something huge happened in the United States. The Civil War broke out. And so like all young men of his age, he enlisted in the Civil War, and he went off, and he was part of the 4th Michigan Cavalry. Maybe because he worked in a drugstore, they made him part of the medical corps. So he was not a soldier, he was a medic in the war. And so here he is, dressed up in his Civil War uniform. And here's another picture of him. I want you to pay close attention to the hair, okay? But here he is, and he was stationed in Tennessee, but then he went all over as a medic. He was captured twice, but because he was a medic, he was immediately released. So Vernor goes off to the Civil War. 4 years later, when the Civil War ends, he comes home to Detroit, and what does he do? He opens up his own drugstore. Now at the time, you needed no education to be a druggist. There was no such thing as, a degree in pharmacology. You just decided that that's what you wanted to do, and that's what you did. So he opens up his drugstore, and you see the address here is 235 Woodward Avenue, which seems like a pretty small address, so it sounds like it must be, pretty far downtown. Well, back in the old days, they kind of numbered buildings, one at a time. So it was out by Woodward and Clifford, which was outside of the actual downtown area of Detroit. For those of you, all you ladies probably know this is where Lululemon is downtown. You probably go to Lululemon all the time, right? And so, thank you, you got it. But so that's where Lululemon is. It's at the southwest corner of Woodward and Clifford. And he opens up his drugstore there. At that time, the way that drugstores and soda fountains and things like that worked was everybody was kind of on their own, making stuff up. And James Vernor didn't like that. He didn't like the fact that if you went to his drugstore, they'd treat a cold differently than if you went to this drugstore or that one. And some of the drugs that these people were putting together, could kill you. So he decided that there actually ought to be some standards in pharmacy. It was James Vernor who developed Michigan's first board of pharmacy, and he held license number 1 the entire time of his practice as a pharmacist. So we think of him as famous for his ginger ale, but he did a lot for pharmacology as well with standards and holding everybody to some ingredients that were the same from one drugstore to the next across the city and across the entire state. So you see it also says pharmacist and florist. It does not mention ginger ale here, but all drugstores had a soda fountain. So when he opened up his drugstore, he opened up a soda fountain there, and then he goes, oh my gosh, I have this keg of ginger ale back at Higby and Stearns. I should go pick that up. So he does, and he brings it back, and he opens it up, and magically, it's perfect. And you see at the top, it says flavor mellowed in wood 4 years. The 4 years of the Civil War aged that extract that was undrinkable, and now 4 years later, it was the Vernors that we all grew up with. So a great drink. Without the Civil War, we might not have had Vernors. Unbelievable. So, and it's actually the extract that's aged in wood. It's not the pop itself. The syrup that they make pop out of is what Vernors made. But what was it? What was it that made Vernor so successful? You see these druggist bottles? By the way, I will show you some pictures every now and then. And if anybody has any of this stuff, just hanging out in a box in your basement and you want to get rid of it, come see me after, let's talk. Because these things are so rare. He was a druggist for 30 years, from 1866 until 1896. You'd think there would be thousands of these druggist bottles out there, and I know of about 10. That's singular 10, not 10,000, 10 whole bottles that have ever been found. So he was a druggist, and one of the things that he did, I love this thing right here. So he was pretty much an entrepreneur just trying to do anything to make a buck. So he was a pharmacist, he had his soda fountain, he had flowers, and here it says, orders received by telephone, mail, or telegraph will receive a special attention. Telegraph was the email of the 1860s. And so he wanted people to be able to order from him no matter what it was that they wanted. Here's a picture of his drugstore right here. And right here is a sign that's actually for a dentist. So he was just down in this floor and not even in the upper floors of this building. So he went from that one floor, one spot, one storefront pharmacy to that huge factory on the river. Here's another picture of him, and I wanted you to pay attention to the hair because this is Vernor, and he still has the same amount of hair, it's just shifted. He had a mighty mustache there, just unbelievable. And I have been all over this picture with a magnifying glass, and I've also looked, the Detroit Historical Museum has a copy of James Vernor's recipe book, if you will, formula book. And it's got things in there for toothpaste, for hand cream, for hair dye, for cough medicine, for all sorts of things to cure whatever ails you. So he basically was the CVS of the 1860s. He wasn't just a drugstore. That wasn't the only thing he did. He did everything. In fact, when I take a look at newspapers from the 1860s, because I want to see things about the ginger ale, is James Vernor talking about cigars. I thought he saw himself as the king of cigars, and that's what he was going to do. And I'm not sure that he ever thought, in the beginning anyway, that the ginger ale was going to take off the way that it did. So here is Mr. Vernor. You get a little bit better look at that magnificent mustache of his. This is the reason I think that Vernor's became so successful and is the longest continuously produced soda pop in America. Back in the day, when you wanted to go get a pop, you didn't go to your refrigerator and pull out a can or a bottle and open it up. You had to go someplace and have them make it for you. So you went to a soda fountain and they put syrup in a glass, and then they added carbonated water to that syrup, and then you would get your pop. They didn't have the refrigeration equipment. They didn't have the technology to put pop in bottles at that time. So if you wanted a pop, the only place you could get it was at a soda fountain. And if James Vernor was only making Vernors in that one little room that I showed you a couple slides ago, it wasn't going to get very popular. So what he did was he put his extract in bottles. It wasn't carbonated. You'd add the carbonated water wherever it was going. And he would sell his extract to other soda fountains, to schools, to hospitals, to restaurants, to anybody. This small bottle might have been for home. Right here, here's an ad to sell ginger ale extract. So you see up here it says Vernor's aromatic ginger ale extract, but down here, 1 pound. Here's a gallon, 5 gallons, 10 gallons of ginger ale extract. And a little bit of extract goes a long way for making Vernors. So if you're buying 10 gallons, you're running a soda fountain or a couple of soda fountains in another city or even another state. So that's what Vernor did that was different than everybody else. You could get Vernors in places other than James Vernor's drugstore. And that was really unique. So here's some other larger extract bottles, not quite the gallon ones yet, but they shipped them out in those. Looks a lot like the druggist bottles. And we like to think of Vernors as Detroit's drink. But here we are, June 20th, 1900, There's a half gallon of ginger ale extract, so that's quite a bit. That's not just for somebody at somebody's house. It's going to a store or a restaurant or a hospital or something like that. And it's going to New York. So in 1900, James Vernor is shipping out his extract to other states so that the little Vernor's empire is starting to spread, and we'll start getting a little bit closer to the most modern bottling facility in the entire world. He also, because he could take his extract and make it portable, he could do something like this. And here was the Vernor's ginger ale outfit, which could be taken to a school fair, a church picnic, a family reunion, whatever you can think of. Vernor's could go there. You didn't have to just go to the soda fountain and buy it and have somebody make it for you. It could go other places. Here's a great ad. I see the Vernor's ad right down here. It's hard to see in this picture, but right up here are roller coaster tracks. And so maybe that's Edgewater Park, or maybe that's Walled Lake Amusement Park, or something like that, Electric Park. And here it was portable because he was selling that extract and you could make it other places. And so here's another beverage, Parco, right here, that we don't know of today. So Vernor's wasn't the first pop. It was just the one that was developed and still survives today. So he didn't invent pop, but he just figured out how to market it better than anybody else at the time. Now that particular sign there is kind of funny because we talk a lot. We talked a little bit about Vernor and him wanting, as a pharmacist, his drugs to be exact, and it's going to be the same, and to have some similarities between pharmacists. So he did that with Vernor's as well. So absolute purity and absolute surety. So Vernor's was going to be the same every single time you had it. So he had explicit directions on how to mix it. So if he was going to send it off, he didn't want just anybody, mixing it any old way. He had, this is exactly how you do it, and this is exactly what you use to make it taste right. Back in the early days, the signs they had, as you can tell by looking at this one, they weren't made out of metal. This was a cloth banner or possibly canvas, something like that. Another instance, I do not have this in my collection. Talk to me after, please. Here you see a little girl and her dog, and you can tell, see, that one's actually, the cloth is ripped there. This one says, a good, wholesome, nourishing drink. Now, a lot of the pops of the day were sold on the benefits that they could do for you physically. So let's take a look at some of those. We've got Coke over here, and Coke was the ideal brain tonic. Relieves mental and physical exhaustion, possibly because it contained cocaine. That might have been one of the reasons. Here we have 7-Up, which originally had lithium in it. Yeah, unbelievable, right? Pepsi over here, healthful and invigorating, cures nervousness, relieves exhaustion. They had no rules on caffeine at the time. So you could put as much caffeine into a drink as you possibly wanted to. And then I had mentioned for the people out east, Moxie Nerve Food. And so some of these pops were not that far separated from the drugs that the druggists were dispensing at their soda fountains, and had things in them that really only belonged in a pharmacy and probably should have stayed behind the druggist counter instead of moving over to the soda fountain. So all of that, of course, changed as rules in the United States changed, and all those harmful substances were removed in the early 1900s. But it still was, decades that these existed and had very addicting drugs in them. Now, Vernor's was not against. Vernor's didn't start as a medicine. It wasn't trying to cure anything, but he saw people were advertising their pops as very healthy and all that. And it did have ginger in it, so he was not against hopping on that bandwagon. So here's to your health, talking about how good Vernor's is, and even the little kids will like it. Truly, it's one of the best childhood pleasures to have Vernor's ginger ale. And of course, no one cared about sugar back then either. So here's Mr. Vernor all grown up, and the hair is the same except the color has changed. And we all know how that happens sometimes. Unfortunate but true. In 1896, three important things happened to the Vernor's pharmacy. James Vernor II joined his dad in the business. They also decided, finally, after 30 years of running the pharmacy, that, you know what, this ginger ale seems to be doing pretty well. I think we can dump the rest of the CVS stuff that we're doing and concentrate just on Vernor's. So they closed the pharmacy and moved, actually. So here is a picture of the pharmacy, and you see it says clearance sale on the banner right there. And so that's the location where Lululemon is, not that building, of course. You can see even back then they were, renovating and ripping down and building new things. And now he moved down, actually truly downtown, to 33 Woodward Avenue. So June 1st, 1896, here's a letter he sent out to everybody. And one excerpt says, "I take great pleasure in calling your attention to the fact that my new place of business is at number 33 Woodward Avenue between Jefferson and the river." So at the time, Woodward went right to the river, didn't stop at Jefferson. Went all the way to the river. So where Hart Plaza is now is where Vernor's was. So it's now up and you're most cordially invited to examine the premises at any time it may suit your convenience, as the work of siphoning and bottling ginger ale is a novelty to most people. It may not be uninteresting to you. Love how they talked back then. It might not be uninteresting. So I guess you might find it interesting, is what he was trying to say. So that was 1896, and it's interesting to me because it says siphoning and bottling of ginger ale, because that's the other thing that happened in 1896. So James Vernor II came in, they closed the pharmacy and moved, and now in 1896 is the first time that Vernor's is going to be bottling Vernor's ginger ale. They can actually put it into bottles. So here's that new location at 33 Woodward Avenue, just to give you a little heads up on where that is. Here it is from the other direction. This is from a postcard, and you can see there's the river and there's boats on the river. So they are almost, not quite, but almost at the river. Now this, when they were talking about siphoning, this is a siphon. We call it a seltzer these days. So a siphon in the old days is a seltzer today, and they would have Vernor's pre-mixed. This wasn't just the carbonated water to mix with the syrup. It would be pre-mixed Vernor's in these seltzer bottles, and now Vernor's mixed is portable. And that's exactly what Vernor wanted, because he didn't want anybody messing up, the ratios of the carbonated water and the syrup. So if it could be pre-mixed, and he knew it would be exact to his standards, then he used these, and they were great. And then they were able to use a bottle that was an individual serve bottle. And it was a bottle just like this one here. And these came a little bit later, right after the turn of the century, maybe about 1905, 1908, somewhere in there. And what these bottles did really was revolutionize the way Vernor's was distributed and served. Because now you could have an individual bottle of Vernor's ginger ale available to you. Not a big siphon bottle, and you didn't have to go to the soda fountain anymore. Now you could have Vernor's at your house, not in your refrigerator, but in your ice box, because they didn't quite have refrigerators yet. So if you look at this, it's got a top on it, kind of like a bottle of champagne. There's a wired on top, and it's got a little lever on the side, and you stick your thumb under the lever and push it up, and that releases that cap. At the time, it would have had cork on it. That's long gone, but at the time, it would have had cork on it. So picture this. You've got a highly carbonated soda pop in here, and you're releasing it like a bottle of champagne. What kind of noise is it going to make? Someone say the word for that noise? Pop. 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 Which is why we call pop, pop. But you're saying, not everybody calls pop, pop. So here's a map. Now, everybody in blue are the people who are smart and correct. That's where the pop people live, okay? Then you see this red group over here, and then some strange little things right here. And those are your soda people. So they must not have had a really highly carbonated pop to open and have it make that sound. There's just kind of a, so it wasn't quite as dramatic as us. But the strangest group is the green group, because that's the group that calls everything Coke. And that's the generic name for pop. So if you go to a restaurant in Louisiana, the server will say, what do you want to drink? You say, well, I want a Coke. Say, well, what flavor? Say, what are you talking about? I want a Coke. But that's just a generic name. Well, do you want a Sprite, or do you want a ginger ale, or do you want orange? Do you want root beer? So that is just their generic name. And then in Oklahoma, apparently they do not answer surveys. So we don't really know what they say there. But yeah, that's the pop first soda versus Coke map right there. And that was actually done North Carolina State. That's an actual study of who says what. So now 33 Woodward, and you can see the address right here. It's got a new sign, and now Vernor actually has all the floors of this one storefront that he's using, and you can see right over here, there's a horse-drawn wagon that now, because you can put pop in bottles, he can deliver at places. Inside there, he had a soda fountain on the first floor. Yeah, look at how people dressed up. And they were not coming to dinner. They didn't serve hot dogs and hamburgers and anything else. You could get a Vernor's at Vernor's. And they came all dressed up like they were going to church to come enjoy a Vernor's at the soda fountain. And so here we go with the horse-drawn wagon. Just great. So now Vernor's became very, very portable. And you needed, because they were heavy, you needed a nice wood case. I've got a case over there in my display that people can take a look at. And then they decided, this bottle was all embossed glass that said Vernor's Ginger Ale, and maybe if we just got a plain bottle and put a paper label on it, that might cost less money. So paper labels began, and this is Vernor's first paper label around 1915. Now here we have a price list, and again, it's not for you and me, because this is selling Vernor's by the gallons down here. So Vernor is getting more and more focused on getting that extract out to other people and to other states. One of the parts of the advertising that I like the most is the advertising that said Detroit's Drink on it. You can also see they hadn't quite decided on the green and yellow as the colors of Vernor's yet, but they had some great advertising that said Detroit's Drink. And this would have all been, you see that old bottle there, so in the late teens into the 20s that Detroit's Drink existed as the logo. So now, if you're keeping track, the individual storefront actually was over here, and now Vernor's has bought these two buildings. For those of you who know your Detroit churches, that's Mariners Church in its original location. I'll show you later, but they moved it to where it is today. But that's the original location of Mariners Church. And now the horses are gone, and we have some real gas-powered trucks here. Now we've moved on a little bit. The sign changed, but now they've got this building. They're the ones you can't even see further down to the left. They're starting to turn into that picture that I showed you at the beginning of the most modern bottling facility in the world. I do look at all sorts of things and try to find Vernor's advertising. Back in the day, and many of you probably remember, unfortunately I don't, Detroit had streetcars. And streetcars had advertising, and some of the advertising was Vernor's advertising. So there you go, a great Vernor sign there, and there's another one down there, same kind, and just fantastic things that Vernor's had. If you went to Detroit Public Schools, you might have carried around a Vernor's advertisement because they gave out book covers, and this one here says, "Say Vernor's a case," because they wanted you to buy Vernor's by the case now that you could, because it's in bottles, and take it home. It says, "What's easy to remember and hard to forget, the answer should come quickly. No scholars missed it yet. I know that I can tell you," said cute Betty Dale. "The answer's simply Vernor's, the best ginger ale. Mothers tell their children to ask for Vernor's ginger ale because it's wholesome and healthful." So, and this guy right here, he's a delivery boy, and in 1921, he was adopted as the mascot for Vernor's, and he would appear on various advertising. You see him right there. There's a paper label, and right at the very top of that paper label is the delivery boy holding a case of Vernor's, because they wanted you to buy it by the case and bring it home because you could. What I love about this label, though, isn't him. Remember what I said about Mr. Vernor being so exact? Let me read this to you. "Vernor's should be ice cold when served, not weakened with ice in the glass. Stir well if preferred." Yes. Don't mess with my formula. Don't put ice, don't put water in. Are you kidding? I'm going to put water in my drink? Are you kidding? So he was extremely particular about how Vernor's was mixed. Around the late 20s, 1930, a new guy came to town, the Vernor's gnome that we all remember. And the gnome was great because his job was to protect the secret formula for Vernor's. So he had a specific duty that he was in charge of. Still down here, "Don't mess with my formula" warning on that label. So for a little bit, we had both the delivery boy and the gnome in advertising together. So you see this young couple that are out on a date, and he's got a bottle, and that's a delivery boy bottle there. But then behind him is a very creepy looking gnome peeking out of the bushes. So I'm really hoping she never turned around to see that. So again, we have the delivery boy bottle and the gnome serving that. So it's a unique part of the advertising with both of the mascots together. Same thing here, gnome, delivery boy. So now we have James the First, James the Second. Guess who this is? James the Third. You are absolutely correct. James the Third. So there was a third James Vernor. This is not him grown up. This is actually James Vernor the First had a son, James the Second, and a daughter. This is the daughter's son, and his name is Vernor Davis. First name Vernor, last name Davis. So, and he would actually end up becoming president of Vernor's, and I'll tell you about that a little while later. So in 1927, James Vernor passed away, and it was said that he worked in the company right up to his final days. And it was at that time that James II was actually able to have some influence over the company. So that's what he looks like all grown up, James II. And his dad, one of the things I didn't mention is his dad was very much a teetotaler. He was against alcohol. And one of the reasons that he wanted a strong ginger ale was so that you could have a strong drink that could stand alone and didn't need to have alcohol in it. Well, James II heard of this company called Canada Dry that seemed to be making quite a bit of money just as a mixer. And so right after James I passed away, Vernor's came out with mixers. And so the right mixer, Arcadia sparkling water, brings out the bouquet of your drink. So it was ultimately not popular. I think people, when they opened a Vernor's, wanted the original Vernor's, not something different. So I spent way too much time as a collector trying to figure out, why is the gnome winking, and why is he winking his right eye? Well, it turns out, that was actually he's winking his left eye. Now he's winking his right eye. So it wasn't consistent, and then sometimes he's not winking his eye at all. Now, what I kind of figured out is that is so creepy that somebody said, make him wink. You got to do something to fix the gnome, because that we can't look at that. Here, here's the left eye, here's the right eye, here's one of each. But they had gnomes in the paper advertising. They had mechanical gnomes. If you were lucky enough to remember that factory at the foot of Woodward and be able to go there on a tour, there were 6 of these guys down there, and their mouths moved, their eyes went back and forth, and they told you the story of Vernor's as you went through the aging cellars. Of course, they didn't have the technology to do that, so it's actually a poster behind them that you read that told you what you were seeing, but it looked like the gnomes were doing that. So they even had these mechanical gnomes. They're extremely, extremely rare. And then they had real live gnomes. If you went to Detroit Public Schools, and if you happened to go to Vernor Elementary School, named after James I, by the way, I skipped over all of James I's work in city government. But he was an alderman, which was city council, for 30 years for the city of Detroit. And Vernor Highway and Vernor Elementary are named after James I, not because of ginger ale, but because of his work with the city. So anyway, just a side story. But anyway, so this thing would show up to Vernor Elementary School, and the kids would go through it, and it had some sort of educational exhibit in the middle, but what they wanted was the gnome at the other end who was serving everybody Vernor's when they got out. Here's another gnome, and he actually started as an artist for Vernor's, and he was hired in the mid-1970s to fix the logo and to make the gnome look a little more friendly. And they said, his name's Ron Bialecki. He said, Ron, you kind of look like the gnome. And he said, I'm an artist. I'm not the gnome. And from 1975 till about 2005, he played the gnome. So, and man, did he take it to heights. Look at that. Remember those old AMC Pacers, those little fishbowl on wheels? He turned that into the Gnome Mobile, and look, he's got gnome hubcaps, gnome keg up on top of there, gnome license plate. He's got gnome buckles on his shoes, a belt buckle. He went all out and really embraced the role as the gnome. Then there was another contest. This was actually in Cobo Hall, and this is the Name the Gnome contest. The name Jerome won. Jerome the Gnome. Kind of has a ring to it, but it didn't really stick. It wasn't until much later, when Dr. Pepper became the owner of Vernor's, that they came up with the name Woody, because of 4 years in wood, as the name of the gnome. That actually has kind of stuck, but they've also had a marketing team behind them pushing that name. And this guy is actually a member of the Vernor's Club, and back in 2016 we celebrated the 150th anniversary of Vernor's at the Detroit Historical Museum, and so he not only grew out his beard, he dyed it red and made the costume and was our most recent gnome. So here is that big factory now that was created from all those little changes that you watched along the way at the foot of Woodward. Here you see that's the Guardian building right there, Vernor's. There's a white tower hamburgers, and really only the Boblo boat docks between them and the river. Here's a better perspective. So if you're looking at Vernor's from an aerial view, this building, the Veterans Memorial Building, is still there. And there's Mariners Church. Jefferson is over here. So all of this was south of Jefferson, so right where Hart Plaza is. So all of this was demolished because the city wanted a civic promenade, and I'll talk about that more later. The beautiful soda fountain inside Vernor's is just incredible. I mean, it's bigger even than this. It goes here across the back wall and then up another side in that building. Just absolutely phenomenal. And this was just a random Tuesday night here. Here we go. And again, they're not serving hamburgers and hot dogs. they serve Vernors. Now, yes, you might be able to get a cream ale, you might be able to get a Boston cooler, you might be able to get flavored Vernors, but you're just getting Vernors. You're not going to a restaurant here. This is just for a soft drink. So, again, why is Vernors the longest continuously produced soda pop in America? It's because of this syrup. We think of it as ours, but it went to Boston, Houston, Pittsburgh. Florida had 4 Vernors bottling plants because Detroiters retired to Florida and they needed to supply the demand. Here is a Vernors soda fountain in Canada. This one is in Dayton, Ohio. Beautiful building. And this one actually still kind of exists. The building is very much intact. In terms of Vernors history, it's the most intact piece we still have. This is what it looks like or what it looked like on the inside, but that is now a Halo Burger, and this is in Flint. This is on Saginaw Street in Flint. The big, beautiful mural is still there, and if you look, you see the V's are still in the wrought iron outside on the Halo Burger. Those beautiful chandeliers from the previous pictures are still there, so it's a fantastic piece of Vernors history in Flint. There's what the mural looks like. It's been repainted a few times, just touched up. As you can see, always has some issues. Now this downtown is downtown Pontiac, and way down there you can kind of see a Vernors sign, a tipping bottle, and it says Vernors. And that's what it looked like. There's the sign up there. And so it's a single storefront. This building in the next picture disappears. It's gone. But this is that old Vernors soda fountain. And today, it's part of a nightclub in Pontiac called the Crowfoot. And you can go see a concert in the Vernors room at the Crowfoot. So they know the history, but it's not nearly as intact as the history up in Flint. So Vernors wasn't against using some beautiful young ladies to promote their soda pop. Lots of great advertising in the 1940s and 50s. Little risque there for Vernors, but they used her in a lot of different advertising. And this young lady is advertising Vernors, but when it's cold, try it hot. So Vernors tried to market the fact that Vernors was a year-round drink. You could drink it cold in the summer, drink it hot in the winter. So as a bottler, you didn't want your profits to go way up and then way down. You wanted them to stay high. And so Vernors tried to convince everybody, drink it hot. So they had these little things. Maybe if you ever have bought tea in a restaurant, they'll bring it to you in one of these little carafes. They would bring you hot Vernors in one of these carafes to pour into your cup. Here's an ad, not for you and me, but for bottlers, other franchisees. Here's a hot item for cold cash. Sell Vernors year-round, hot or cold. One of the things that we probably enjoy the most is Vernors. You see it says cooler, not Boston Cooler. So let me tell you a little story about Boston Cooler. Boston Cooler was a generic soda jerk term for any pop with ice cream in a glass. So you want a Boston Cooler, what do you want? There's ads out there for Hires Boston Coolers, for Dr. Pepper Boston Coolers. But in 1967, Vernors wanted to come out with an ice cream bar, and they wanted to call it a Boston Cooler ice cream bar. And so they took what had been a generic name and they trademarked it. So from 1967 till now, Boston Cooler has belonged to Vernors. So a lot of people ask, well, why don't they call it a Detroit Cooler? And what does it have something to do with Boston Boulevard, or did it originate in Boston? None of that. It was just a generic soda jerks term, and Vernors trademarked it and started using it. So since '67, it's been always associated with Vernors. Look at this, Vernors and milk. Well, think about it. I mean, ice cream, you know, and I take my ice cream and I just stir it around until it's all melted in my Vernors anyway, right? So I just takes the work out of it right here. But if you want to get the kids to drink their milk, mix a little Vernors in it. That was the ploy here. A Vernors cream ale. My dad, his favorite at Vernors was the cream ale. And so this is the recipe for Vernors cream ale. 1.5 ounces of chilled sweet cream, which they don't actually sell sweet cream anymore, so you got to make that too. Put 1.5 ounces of sweet cream in each glass, 8-ounce glass, and fill the rest with Vernors. If you do this at home with, like, you know, whipping cream or something like that, beware, it expands. So use a bigger glass or smaller proportions, or else you will have a little Vernors volcano on your kitchen counter. So just be careful of that. But look what it says here also. It says, add any syrup flavoring that you like. So my dad, he liked a cherry cream ale, and that's what he got every time he went to Vernors. My mom and dad dated at Vernors before World War II, and that's what he would get when he went there. Now, not every recipe was a famous one. No one has ever told me that they loved the peppermint ale fizz. But if anybody wants to try it, there are recipes out there. And chocolate Vernors, and I've not found any combination of chocolate and Vernors that I liked. Somebody said if you made the cream ale but make it chocolate milk with the Vernors, and I just tried that recently, and it's not that good. So, but maybe it's your thing. It's not mine. So maybe you can try that. However, this is great, right? Anybody still make their holiday hams with Vernors? Sure, absolutely. All right, let me take you on a little history trip here. We've got James I, James II, James III, 1941. That's right about the time Vernors is the most modern bottling facility in the world. Let's move on 5 years. It's the 80th anniversary of Vernors. A lot of times you come to history talks and you're sad because your things don't exist anymore. That's why I love this picture. This is the 80th anniversary of Vernors. Still exists. Woohoo! WXYZ is broadcasting it. Still exists. And it's taking place in Music Hall. Still exists. Yeah, wow, 3 for 3. Gotta like that. So they had a big radio program and even had a 13 record set of the show. But it was 78 RPM, so they go by pretty quick, those albums. So now we're moving on 5 more years here. 1951, we've got James I, James II, James III, and James IV. Now, James IV is 11 years old in this picture. Inside this newsletter, there's a little paragraph about him. It says, James IV, waiting in the wings, can't wait to get into the Vernors company and, steer the ship or something like that. And that would never happen. The 1950s were not kind to the Vernors company, and I'll tell you why. Right about 1951, well, let me show you the celebration first. They were still happy. They didn't know all this yet. There's James II, James III, cutting the anniversary cake. Soon after that, the city of Detroit came to Vernors and they said, we need you to move. You need to leave the riverfront. We want your property. And so they actually condemned Vernors' bottling plant, and they gave the company a little over $1 million to move. They moved up to the plant that you probably remember, up on Woodward and Canfield, Wayne State territory, and but it cost them $5 million to make that move, and they only got $1 million from the city. It's early 1950s. It's a lot of money today. It's a real lot of money back then. So this is the last glass of Vernors served at that beautiful soda fountain that I showed you in those pictures before. And this guy right here with the smirk on his face is Mayor Cobo. Yes, whose idea this was. So here, I told you I'd show you Mariners Church being moved. So that is the Mariners right there and being slid over to the entrance by the tunnel entrance over there. This is Ford Auditorium being built. So it was being built then, it's already gone, but it was being built then. And here's Vernor's, and unfortunately, so is this, being subject to the wrecking ball. So they were working on a new factory, and this is the one up on Woodward Avenue. It officially opened in 1954, but just before it opened, James Vernor II passed away. 2 years before he passed away, he was remarried. And so now you have the wife of James II in battle with James III and other heirs for control of the company. And the wife of James II lost, but not after expending a couple more million of Vernor's funds to try to fight that particular battle. So the new plant was opened, and lo and behold, remember Vernor Davis? Vernor Davis became president of the company before James III. So here's that huge, beautiful sign out front. Unfortunately, that does not exist anywhere. Wish it was at Greenfield Village or somewhere, but it is not. 1956, 90th anniversary of Vernor's. In 1957, James III passed away at 39 years of age. He liked to drink, but not Vernor's. And so he had some liver issues that led to his death. He was on wife number 3 at the time, and she wanted control of the company. And so there was more fighting. For about 2 years, it was in court. And I don't really know at the time who was in charge of Vernor's, but more millions. So you got the move, you got the death of James II, the death of James III, and by 1959, the Vernor's company was bleeding so much, just millions and millions of dollars, they could no longer sustain it as a family company, and they had to sell to investors. So what happened was, for all you English grammar people out there, we had Vernor's with the possessive apostrophe belonging to the Vernors became Vernor's. No longer belongs to the Vernors. And that happened in November of 1959. So here's the plant again, the big sign. It had its own air conditioning unit. It produced so much heat. What happened was Vernor's, they were sold to investors, and then investors sold them, and then and it just went through a succession of companies. By 1985, a company called United Brands had control of it and decided that they needed a new bottling plant. And so they closed this one, never did open up a new one. And so you can see the sign is in disrepair and being dismantled. That one sign on the end, right there with the gnome, actually still exists in a store called Pure Detroit in Midtown Detroit. So you can go visit it sometime. And so 1987, the plant was totally demolished, and now we have our advertising where it's no longer a family business, unfortunately. So here's what happens. Here's the owners, and I'll just go through this quickly, but 1866, 1927, James I. From there to 54, James II. Only a few years there until he died, James III. You notice 57 to 59 is missing. They were in court for 2 years. Then it went to investors. We lost the apostrophe. Frank's Foods, United Brands, and then A&W. Technically, Vernor's is still owned by A&W. A&W scooped it up. Al Taubman, the shopping mall guy, owned A&W Brands, and so they bought Vernor's and helped protect them. But then all the little brands started getting swept up by the big companies. So it's kind of like the car companies. There's the big three pop companies. There's Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. And if you look at Dr. Pepper portfolio, they've got Orange Crush, Canada Dry, Hires, A&W, Schweppes, Vernors, Snapple. They've got 40 different brands underneath them. Squirt. A lot of those big independent brands are now underneath an umbrella, and most of them really under the Dr. Pepper umbrella, those oddball brands. So we go then to Cadbury. Strange, a candy company bought them, and then the United States actually made Cadbury spin off the pop part, so it became Dr. Pepper Snapple. And then Keurig, yes, Keurig, the coffee company, bought the whole shebang a few years back, and now it's Keurig Dr. Pepper. However, they've really been good owners, and they've done some cool stuff with the company. Vernors is no longer bottled in Detroit, but it is bottled in Holland, Michigan. And here's the Dr. Pepper plant in Holland. Everything's new but the flavor. So we've been through a lot of changes with Vernors. Let me just show you some of them. They didn't have cans back in 1910, but to show you the logo, we've got the apostrophe. It says ginger ale. By 59, it doesn't even say ginger ale anymore. No apostrophe, doesn't say ginger ale. That's till 67. We changed to this logo with that weird looking gnome. Things softened up a little bit. We've pretty much had that same script all the way since. We just tip it sideways or on an angle like this. You might remember some of these cans. And then right about here, they put a barrel on the side. And right here it says, barrel aged 3 years. Well, yeah, wait a second. Thought that slogan was mellowed in wood 4 years. So apparently they found that the Civil War could have been 3 years long, and we still could have had Vernors. Aged 3 years. Now this one says barrel aged. Oh, I hate it when the scientists start, screwing things up, right? So here we go, barrel aged. Now we have authentic. So there's not even a barrel in the room that this stuff passes by. They scienced out the barrel from this whole process here. So talked a little bit about the event in 2016 to celebrate 150 years of Vernors. Just absolutely amazing stuff. We had a few people, a few friends, a few close friends came. We had 4,000 people come to the Historical Museum that day to celebrate the birthday of Vernors. And what's kind of cool about this, I showed you the pictures of James I, James II, James III, James IV. This guy right here, James V. And this guy right here, sorry, I have the backs of their heads, not the front, James VI. And James VI just got married last year. So, I suggest that maybe there should be a James VII coming along. So who knows? We'll see. So the legacy continues. Now, some of you may remember the black cherry. And personally, I thought it was a good black cherry, but it didn't taste like Vernors to me at all. So they came out in 22 and then again in 23, and actually surprised me just at Christmas time. They were back out with black cherry, just on a very limited basis, but it's kind of fun, little different. So that's what, again, I think that the Dr. Pepper folks they're good. They're doing some fun things with Vernors. So this is the entrance to my basement, and I made a fatal error about 33 years ago when my wife and I were looking for a new house from where we had previously lived. She was worried about how many bedrooms, and I wanted to see the basement. And so I went down the basement, and I said, "Wow, this is a nice basement." And so well, I want to put my all my stuff down. She could do whatever you want, but it stays in the basement. And I stupidly, I said, okay, because that long ago my collection didn't fill the basement. Well, so now This is the doorway that goes into my basement. So I start immediately going into the basement with all of my stuff. I've got a few things. Yeah, I know. I got a problem, but I tell her, I say, you know what? It could be worse. It could be worse. This is not my boat. I wish it was my boat, but it's not my boat. This is not my truck. Pretty cool, but it's not my truck. What she is most excited about, though, this is not my tattoo. She's extremely happy about that. At the 150th anniversary, I could not believe how many people had Vernor's tattoos. It was a lot. It was unbelievable. Everyone wanted to show it to me, so it was very interesting. So you notice this little Facebook sign up here. So I retired 6 years ago, and I found out about this thing called Facebook, and I never knew that there was such a thing out there, and people post weird stuff, and so somebody posted a picture of their aunt or grandmother or somebody like that, and look what she's standing in for. Look at the Vernor sign, and there's Vernor's. Get out of the way! But if she wasn't standing there, I would never have gotten that picture, right? So, but I've never seen any of that advertising, and so I know there's just a ton of stuff out there that I we'll never know how much they produce. Absolutely unbelievable. So I'm always looking. Now, don't know if any of you subscribe to Fox Nation. I subscribed for 1 month because they had this thing called The History of the World in 6 Glasses. And the 6 glasses, see if I can remember, are coffee, tea, wine, spirits, beer, and pop. And yours truly, because Vernor's is the oldest continuously made pop in the United States, got to be on that episode. I didn't meet any of these guys, unfortunately. So, they just sent a camera crew to talk to me and then splice it in, make it seem like these guys saw it, but they didn't. But then, Pawn Stars. Pawn Stars was in the Detroit area 2 years ago. And they did, they wanted to do some Detroit stuff, so they actually contacted me and they said, would you be willing to sell or to, try to make an offer to sell a sign to the guys? And I said, well, because I want to meet Rick. Rick's the man. Would love to meet Rick. And so I'll do that. So I went down there and they had, this big deal, and they had all the, it was kind of cool with the cameras and the people all set up and doing everything. And so when the time comes for me to do my deal with the sign, was it Rick? No. I got Chumley. Chumley. So we did not make a deal. So I hate to ruin that episode for you, but we didn't make a deal. But it's kind of a fun thing. So I mentioned in the beginning, I have a Vernor's Club for collectors of Vernor's advertising. I actually have had a newsletter, quarterly newsletter for 19 years. So amazing that I can find that much to write about for 19 years. And they're all kind of long, like 25 pages of all about Vernor's history. We just go down some rabbit hole nuance of something about Vernor's, and the Vernor's book as well, and be happy to have anybody sign one for anybody who wants one. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions too. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
How did they?
Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks again for coming out tonight, folks, on this very cold evening.